John Mitchell was on his knees, scrubbing oil stains from the hangar floor when the sound reached him. 52 years old, 30 years of military service, and this was what it had come to. The man who once kept Apache helicopters flying through sandstorms in Fallujah was now wielding a mop instead of a wrench. Around him, younger technicians passed by with barely concealed smirks. One of them, Marcus Webb, had said it just yesterday, old-timers should stick to what he knows, cleaning. The words still burned, but then came that sound, a roar from the test pad that made John's head snap up. An Apache engine screaming in a way that shouldn't happen. In 6 minutes, that same Apache would refuse to start for a critical mission, and Colonel Richards would call only one name over the base-wide intercom. The name everyone thought was finished. The bucket of dirty water sloshed as John carried it toward the drain. His hands, once steady enough to calibrate turbine blades in complete darkness, now trembled slightly from the cold concrete and cheap disinfectant. This was his 4th month of janitorial duty. 4th month of humiliation. The official term was reassignment pending skill recertification, but everyone knew what it really meant. He was obsolete, a relic from an era before diagnostic computers and AI-assisted maintenance systems. John remembered a different time. Baghdad, 2007. An Apache took enemy fire and limped back to base with hydraulics failing and half its instruments dark. The pilot was bleeding, the co-pilot unconscious, and command needed that bird back in the air within 4 hours. John had climbed into that cockpit, his hands reading the machine like Braille, finding problems the computers couldn't detect because half the sensors were shot to hell. 3 hours and 40 minutes later, the Apache flew again. They gave him a commendation. Called him indispensable. That word felt like a cruel joke now. "Yo, Pops, you missed a spot," Marcus Webb's voice carried across the hangar. The 28-year-old engineer pointed at a patch of floor near his workstation, grinning at his colleagues. They all had the same look. Fresh faces armed with engineering degrees and unshakable confidence in their tablets and software. Marcus was the worst of them, brilliant with code, but arrogant enough to think that made him invincible. John said nothing. He'd learned that silence was the only dignity left to him. He pushed his mop toward the spot Marcus indicated, feeling every eye in the hangar tracking his movement. The younger technicians clustered around their workstations, surrounded by monitors displaying three-dimensional schematics and real-time diagnostics. Their world was clean, digital, certain. His world had been grease and intuition and the kind of knowledge that came from making mistakes that could kill people. "Hey, Mitchell." The voice was different, softer. Sarah Chen approached, carrying her toolkit. She was 35, senior enough to remember when John ran this hangar. "Don't let them get to you. Half these kids wouldn't know a fuel pump from a coffee maker without their computers telling them." "It's fine, Chen." John squeezed excess water from the mop. "They're good at what they do." "They're good at reading screens." Sarah glanced back at the cluster of young engineers. "That's not the same thing?" John didn't respond. Through the massive hangar doors, he could see the flight line. 3 Apaches sat ready, their sleek profiles sharp against the afternoon sun. He'd worked on every single one of them at some point in their service lives. Knew their quirks, their personalities. Machines weren't supposed to have personalities, but anyone who'd spent real time with them knew better. Each Apache was different, temperamental in unique ways that no diagnostic program could predict. But that knowledge didn't matter anymore. The military wanted efficiency, standardization, technicians who could plug in a laptop and follow the prompts. John Mitchell, with his 3 decades of grease under his fingernails and scars on his hands, was a liability. Too expensive, too slow, too old. He finished mopping and headed toward the storage closet. Behind him, Marcus laughed at something on a screen. The sound followed John like an epitaph. The briefing came at 0600. A senator, 2 generals, and a foreign dignitary needed transport to a forward operating base. The mission was classified, urgent, and absolutely critical. Apache 279er would provide escort and rapid response capability. It was their newest bird, loaded with the latest avionics and fresh from a complete systems overhaul. Marcus Webb's team had spent 3 weeks on the final certification, running every diagnostic protocol in the book. The computer systems showed green across the board. "Perfect," John heard about it while emptying trash bins near the operations center. He wasn't part of the briefing anymore, but sound carried in military buildings, and people talked. A knot formed in his stomach, the kind of instinct he'd learned to trust over the years. Something felt wrong, though he couldn't explain why. Just a feeling, and feelings didn't mean anything in the age of data-driven maintenance. By 1400 hours, the flight line was a hive of controlled chaos. Captain Hayes, one of their best pilots, was running pre-flight checks on Apache 279er. The VIPs would arrive in 90 minutes. Everything needed to be flawless. John watched from a distance, pretending to sweep near the hangar entrance. Hayes climbed into the cockpit, his crew chief standing by with a tablet, monitoring every system activation. The startup sequence began. Auxiliary power units spinning up, avionics coming online, the familiar whine of turbines preparing to ignite. Then nothing. The main engines turned over once, twice, and died. Hayes tried again. Same result. The Apache coughed, sputtered, and refused to start. Within minutes, Marcus and his team swarmed the aircraft. Laptops connected, diagnostic programs running, sensor data streaming across multiple screens. John edged closer, unable to help himself. Years of instinct drew him toward a wounded bird the way a doctor moved toward an injured patient. Fuel pressure nominal, one technician called out. Electrical systems check out, another confirmed. Hydraulics within specifications. Marcus stood in the center of the chaos, his confidence visibly cracking. Run the full diagnostic suite again. There has to be something. Colonel Richards arrived, his jaw tight. Status, Webb. Sir, we're troubleshooting now. The systems aren't showing any faults. Everything should be operational, but the engines won't sustain ignition. Should be isn't good enough. We have VIPs inbound in 70 minutes. I need solutions, not excuses. Marcus turned to his team. Check the backup sensors. Cross-reference the maintenance logs. There has to be an error code somewhere. 20 minutes passed, then 30. The technicians ran every program, checked every reading, and found nothing. The computers insisted the Apache was flight ready. The Apache itself disagreed. Colonel Richards paced near the bird, his radio crackling with increasingly urgent updates from command. Sir, Marcus's voice had lost its usual confidence. We could pull Apache 263 from the ready line. It would take time to brief the pilot and run checks, but we don't have time, Webb. 263 has a different avionics package. The pilots need to be certified for that specific configuration, and that takes hours we don't have. Sarah Chen had been standing at the edge of the group, watching. She stepped forward. Sir, there's someone else we could ask. Marcus's head snapped toward her. Chen, we've run every diagnostic. If the computers can't find it, the computers don't know everything. Sarah met Colonel Richards' eyes. Mitchell worked on this exact bird during its last overhaul. He knows these systems inside and out. Mitchell? Marcus actually laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. The janitor? Sir, with respect, he doesn't have clearance for the new diagnostic systems. He wouldn't even know where to start. Colonel Richards looked at the Apache, then at his watch, then made his decision. He grabbed the radio handset. This is Colonel Richards. I need John Mitchell to the flight line immediately. John was near the parts depot when he heard his name echo across the base loudspeaker. Every person on the flight line turned to look as he emerged from the hangar, mop still in hand. For a moment, 30 years of humiliation and 30 years of pride went to war inside him. Then the old instinct won. There was a bird down, and nothing else mattered. John walked across the tarmac, aware of every eye tracking his movement. The young technicians stepped aside as he approached, their expressions ranging from skepticism to outright hostility. Marcus stood with his arms crossed, tablet clutched like a shield. Colonel Richards met John halfway, his face unreadable. Mitchell, you worked on 279er during the overhaul 3 months ago, correct? Yes, sir. Supervised the turbine maintenance and fuel system inspection. The bird won't start. Webb's team has run every diagnostic, and the computers show no faults. I need it flying in 45 minutes. Can you help? John looked past the colonel at the Apache. Even from here, he could see Captain Hayes sitting in the cockpit, frustrated and helpless. I can try, sir. That's all I'm asking. You have 45 minutes. This mission cannot fail. John approached the aircraft slowly, methodically. He set his mop against the landing gear, an absurd detail that would have been funny under different circumstances. His hands reached out and touched the Apache's fuselage, feeling the metal warm from the afternoon sun. It was like greeting an old friend who'd been hurt. Sir, this is a waste of time. Marcus moved to block John's path. We've already checked everything. The sensors would detect any mechanical fault. He doesn't even have access to the diagnostic systems. Stand aside, Webb. Colonel Richards' voice carried command authority. Mitchell, the bird is yours. John didn't need the computers. He started with the basics, the things that machines couldn't feel. He climbed up to inspect the rotor head, his fingers checking the blade pitch adjustment. The movement was smooth, within tolerance. He dropped down and moved to the turbine intakes, looking, listening, smelling. Oil, exhaust, hydraulic fluid. They all told stories if you knew how to read them. Captain Hayes, try the startup sequence again, please. Hayes initiated. The auxiliary power unit hummed to life. The main turbines began their rotation. John stood perfectly still, his eyes closed, listening. The engines turned over, building toward ignition, then faltered. But there, in that split second before failure, he heard it. A tiny hiccup, a microsecond disruption in the fuel flow that the sensors were too slow to catch. Stop, John called out. Shut it down. He moved to the fuel system access panel on the starboard side, his hands working the fasteners with muscle memory. Marcus appeared beside him, tablet extended. The fuel pressure readings are perfect. There's no fault in the system. Your readings are measuring pressure at the tank and the manifold. They're not measuring flow consistency. John pulled the panel free and peered into the maze of lines and connections. Where's your flashlight? Sarah Chen appeared with one before Marcus could respond. John took it, angling the beam into the tight space. There, a fuel coupling, barely visible behind the primary feed line. He reached in, his fingers tracing the metal. The surface felt wrong, slightly rough where it should be. Smooth. I need a mirror, small one. Someone handed him an inspection mirror. John wedged it into position, adjusting the angle until he could see the backside of the coupling. A hairline crack, so thin it was almost invisible, ran along the weld seam. He pulled back, his mind already running calculations. Found it. Microfracture in the fuel coupling. Section 7 delta. It's allowing air into the fuel line. Not enough to trigger the pressure sensors, but enough to disrupt flow during ignition. The engine's flooding itself and triggering the automatic shutdown sequence. Marcus leaned in, squinting at the coupling. That's impossible. That coupling was installed during the overhaul. It's brand new and the sensors would detect a pressure drop. It's not brand new. Check your parts inventory. That coupling is from the October 2018 production batch. There was a manufacturing defect in that run, a weakness in the weld that takes 6 to 7 years to develop under thermal stress. Your computer doesn't know history, Webb. I do. I pulled 20 of these exact couplings out of birds back in 2022, filed a report. Apparently nobody read it. Colonel Richards checked his watch. Can you fix it? If I have the right parts in 15 minutes. Chen, I need a replacement coupling, 7 Delta Standard, and a seal kit. On it. Sarah was already running toward the parts depot. Mitchell, you're guessing. Marcus's voice had an edge of desperation. You're risking a critical mission on a hunch. John turned to face the younger man. Son, I've been wrong before and people died. I've also been right when computers were wrong and people lived. In 15 minutes, we'll know which one this is, but right now, that bird is grounded either way, so we've got nothing to lose. Sarah returned with the parts. John and Chen worked in synchronized silence, their hands moving with practiced efficiency. Drain the line, release the pressure, disconnect the old coupling, inspect the threads, apply sealant, install the new coupling, torque to specification, reconnect, repressurize. 12 minutes. Captain Hayes, we're ready. Hayes initiated the startup sequence for the 3rd time. Auxiliary power unit, check. Avionics, check. Turbine spin up, smooth and steady. The engines caught, held, and roared to life with the clean, powerful sound of a perfectly functioning machine. The Apache was alive. John stepped back, wiping his hands on a rag. Around him, the flight line erupted in a burst of released tension. Technicians who'd been holding their breath let it out. Captain Hayes gave a thumbs up from the cockpit. The engines purred, steady and strong. Colonel Richards approached, his hand extended. "Welcome back, Chief." The handshake was firm, official, but the colonel's eyes carried something more than professional gratitude. "Report to my office at 0800 tomorrow. We need to discuss your reassignment." Nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. Apache 279er lifted off 6 minutes later, its turbines singing a perfect song. He watched it disappear into the eastern sky, carrying its precious cargo toward the mission that couldn't fail. The mission that almost did. Marcus Webb approached slowly, his tablet hanging loose in one hand. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something harder to carry: humility. "I need to apologize, Mitchell. I thought technology had all the answers. I thought experience was just old guys refusing to adapt. I was wrong." John studied the younger man's face, seeing genuine remorse there. "You're not wrong about technology, Webb. Those diagnostic systems are incredible tools, but they're only as good as the knowledge behind them. A computer can process data, but it can't understand context. It can't remember that a batch of parts from 6 years ago had a flaw. It can't hear the difference between a healthy engine and one that's about to fail. That takes time, mistakes, and scars." Sarah Chen joined them, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Chief, Colonel Richards wants you to develop a training program. Cross-generational knowledge transfer. Pair the old hands with the new tech. Teach these kids what the computers can't." John looked around the flight line at the younger technicians watching him with new expressions. Not mockery now, but something closer to respect. Maybe even hunger to learn. I'd like that very much." The sun was setting behind the hangars, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. John Mitchell had spent the morning scrubbing floors. He'd spend tomorrow morning teaching the next generation how to keep these magnificent machines flying. Some lessons could only be learned through years of grease under your nails and scars on your hands. If this story reminded you of the value of experience, share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that honor the unsung heroes who keep us safe.